Strange, a Lone Gunmen Rewatch podcast. And good, it's recorded this time because we got too far into the last one and I hadn't pressed the button. I do deeply apologise.
I'm just going to assume that everyone knew what I said somehow.
That's fine.
Via the collective unconscious, and I don't have to say it again.
Yep. Also, I'm Nick, and the person about to go to sleep is Kim.
Hi.
And we'll get through this fast because, well, actually, no, we were trying to do that last time because we were irritated, but also because we have no news.
No,
Nope.
Nothing to do with FileFest or to do with the supposed revival of the X-Files that's been really quiet for a while now.
It has. It got mentioned like a little while ago, but that was been it. There's no new books on the horizon, no new comics that we're aware of.
But we are going to finally finish talking about the Lone Gunmen today.
Yes. With an asterisk.
Finally finished.
I know. So, All About Yves. Directed by Brian Spicer. Written by John Gilnitz, being Frank Spotnitz, Vince Gilligan, and John Shaban. Gilnitz! And first broadcast on the 11th of May 2001. There are returning guest stars who we've seen before. You know who David Duchovny is, I hope.
In case you don't, he's Fox Mulder in the X-Files.
Yep. Morris Fletcher might need a bit more explanation, played by Michael McKean, who has done lots of various things, but his big ones are things like Better Call Saul and Spinal Tap.
So he was David St. Hubbins in Spinal Tap, and Chuck, Saul's brother in Better Call Saul.
Yep. We did cover him back in Dreamland, as far as I'm aware. And he's shown up in Dreamland 1 and 2, Three of a Kind, and now here. The only guest star of note, because there's also Kimmy in this episode, is Max Wyman, who played the clerk. Just the clerk. Who was previously in Patient X and will show up in Millennium.
As different characters, I presume.
Yes. Oh yeah, he's someone else in that.
Would you like to give us a summary of All About Yves?
No, but I shall. Morris Fletcher is attempting to seduce a woman at a Washington, D.C. bar. When he tends to pay to take the girl to his room, he inadvertently reveals he is married when his wedding ring falls out of his wallet. The woman storms off. Morris heads away, and when a bright light in the sky, seemingly UFO, suddenly shines down directly upon him. He finds himself naked and hooked up to a torture chair, which is seemingly aboard the craft. The grey alien approaches him with a wand and threatens to use it on his nose unless he reveals what the Miron Project is. Frightened, Fletcher claims the project relates to the government use of alien weapon technology, as the grey alien should know. The alien nevertheless inserts a wand into his nose, causing him to howl in pain. Sometime later, the Lone Gunmen speed away. He removes a Halloween mask, revealing that he was in fact the grey alien, and all the gunmen and Jimmy are ecstatic to have managed to fool Fletcher. The group are, however, stopped and surrounded by soldiers who aim guns at them. The gunmen and Jimmy are forced to their knees by the soldiers, and Fletcher arrives in his car. He's about to have them shot when Frohike admits that they were led to him by an email from the domain name Romeo61, which evokes a troubled expression from Fletcher. The gunmen and Jimmy are left lying on the ground, surprised when they're not shot. Later in their offices, the hacker associated Kimmy helps them search for information about Romeo61. They eventually manage to access a list of dates and locations that seems to suggest many historical tragedies were actually government-sanctioned terrorist acts, including the JFK assassination, then the Lockerbie bombing. Kimmy starts to panic about his involvement and hurries away. Ignoring Jimmy's advice to drop the subject as Kimmy suggested, the gunmen consider how best to deal with the situation, and buyers suggest they talk to Fletcher. Fletcher manages to seduce another woman at the bar, but when he arrives in his hotel room, he finds Frohike dressed in a bathrobe. The woman, freaked out, leaves, and Byers and Langley join them. The gunmen suspect that Fletcher needs them due to his fear of Romeo61. He offers their services, but Fletcher immediately insults the group's publication and alleges that their status as lowly journalists was the reason he let them live. They're about to leave when Fletcher reluctantly accepts their help. At night, Jimmy meets up with Yves, who is in a rush, and stays in her car. Jimmy tells her of the worries that the gunmen may be in over their heads, and Yves advises him not to let the gunmen go through with the story, but that she cannot personally help, and hurries away. Fletcher tells the gunmen that Romeo61 is essentially motivated to cause destructive havoc. He says he has a big meeting on Friday at which he is supposed to present information that Frohike correctly guesses that concerns the Miron Project. According to Fletcher, however, the information has been stolen, and if he attends the meeting without it, he will most certainly be killed. Morris begins to detail the robber, and the gunmen quickly deduce that this was in fact Yves under another pseudonym. Yves was led to Fletcher's hotel room where she managed to drug him and then steal a zip disk from the safe. The gunmen admit to Fletcher they have had dealings with Yves, and Fletcher implicates her as the sender of the Romeo61 email. In their own offices, Byers and Langley tell Fletcher about their unsuccessful efforts to track down the enigmatic Yves. Langley mentions that Yves managed to change her billing address to the Martha Stewart living. Jimmy is surprised to see Fletcher present and urges the gunman to abandon the story, mentioning that Yves gave him the same advice. Langley is irritated that Jimmy told Yves about the story. The gunmen are now convinced Yves is part of Romeo 61. Yves technologically leaves a message on Mulder's answering machine, making it seem as if Rohiki is calling with news of a significant discovery that he wants to discuss in person. The gunmen, Morris and Jimmy, meanwhile conduct a 4-hour search for Yves, first returning to the hotel where Fletcher encountered her before the team hacks into several surveillance cameras. They ultimately track her to a room in Bishop Place Hotel, and despite being wary of traps, Langley is doused in blue paint. The group search the room while Jimmy criticises their approach. An angered Langley eventually shouts at him to leave, and despite Byers and Frohke both urging Langley to calm down, Jimmy leaves. Moments later, Langley comes across an opening receipt for a Swiss bank account that was opened on the previous day with a vast amount of money from Phoenix Atlantic Corporation. Langley assumes that the Phoenix Atlantic Corporation is another name for Romeo 61, and Byers implies his conclusion that Yves sold Fletcher's disc to them. Meanwhile, Yves walks to a department in the Smithsonian Institution and to a clerk's desk. She uses a cover story on the clerk, and he, familiar with her, plays along. The clerk is under the impression that she has come to sell something, voicing disappointment at having been excluded from several opportunities that surprisingly never made it to market, such as the Octium 4 chip and the water-powered car. Yves quietly demands to know who the clerk has told about her and whether a certain unnamed group knows of her whereabouts. Moments later, she bulks back out of the apartment, being spied upon by a sharply dressed man. While preparing to leave the gunman's office for good, Jimmy notices an incoming email. It is Mulder's reply to the gunman, have been unable to contact the number left by Yves. Mulder's email arranges to meet the gunman at 14th and K Streets, but at 10 o'clock instead of 9. Jimmy mistakenly assumes the email was sent by Yves. The gunman studies the secure headquarters of Phoenix Atlantic, and Fletcher teases the blue-faced Langley. They discover the building's plan indicate a massive vault on the 16th subterranean floor, and Byers starts to formulate a plan, inspired by the paint on Langley's face. Yves is pursued by the sharply dressed man, and she turns the tables on him and appears at his window with a silenced pistol. She listens to the man at gunpoint, who delivers a message that the Lone Gunmen will be dying unless she comes with him, but rather than accompanying him, she shoots out his tires and vanishes. Meanwhile, Byers explains to Fletcher that by covering Langley's face in blue paint and pink dots, they can fool the facial recognition scanner into reading his face as one in its database. Jimmy goes in search of Yves, but instead finds Mulder. They eventually figure out who the other is and why they are there. Jimmy recognizes Mulder based on the Lone Gunmen stories, and Mulder is more intent on resolving the misunderstanding of the meeting arrangement. Meanwhile, talking on the phone to the sharply dressed man, Fletcher watches the gunmen start to make their way into the headquarters of Phoenix Atlantic. Having kidnapped Kimmy, Jimmy forces him into the gunmen's offices and recounts his only encounter with Mulder, instructs Kimmy to trace a contact number that Mulder gave him, the same number that Yves left on Mulder's answering machine. When Jimmy traces it to Martha Stewart living, Jimmy realizes that Yves was going to meet with Mulder and give him Fletcher's disc. Yves confirms this when she arrives and hands this to Jimmy, charging him with its delivery to Agent Mulder. She takes the computer over from Kimmy and explains to the curious Jimmy that the disc contains nothing as exotic as the Miron Project, but is a list of people who have been brainwashed by the likes of Fletcher into believing they are adoptees. Yves then says that Romeo 61 is disinformation created to bait the Lone Gunmen. Yves becomes frustrated being unable to determine the name of the sharply dressed man, so Kimmy voluntarily continues the search. Yves tells Jimmy that although Fletcher is using the gunman as bait to get her, he simply wants his disc back and is working for another man who has spent a long time looking for her. But she will not give his name to Jimmy. Jimmy recalls the last time he saw the trio in Yves' hotel room, but she reveals he doesn't have a room in that hotel. At Phoenix Atlantic, the gunmen take the elevator to the negative 16th floor, where they find a massive vault door. Byers suspects that behind the door lies every answer to every question they've ever had. Jimmy, Kimmy, and Yves arrive outside the building to find the VW bus abandoned. Yves concludes the gunman likely inside, and Jimmy concocts a foolhardy plan, but Yves injects him, knocking him out cold. She tells Jimmy to take Jimmy home, and begins to head inside the building herself. The Lone Gunmen struggle to open the door when they realize the schematics of the building are inaccurate. They watch as the elevator descends to their level and opens to reveal Fletcher, the sharply dressed man, and a detachment of troops who not only surround the gunman, but also hold Yves in custody. To be continued.
Da 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 da.
And you have to wait a while for that one. It's really odd. I think we said this in the Captain Toby show. It's really odd to suddenly try and do something with Yves.
Apparently, at the point this episode was written and produced, the future of the series was actually up in the air. So they decided what they would do is they would try literally every trick in the book to try and entice the producers to let them make another season of it, which is why the episode is so much faster paced than any other episode. It's got car chasers, it's got a conspiracy building in, hints that we're going to find out who Yves is that never really come to anything, the to be continued ending. We'll throw everything at this and hope they give us another season, but sadly for them, they didn't get it.
Yeah. But I mean, just to focus on it for the first part, is the who Yves is why do we care?
You may be in the minority there, but this
Well,
kind of thing does hook viewers.
I know, but I mean...
It's like who shot JR sort of thing.
True, but well, okay, but take that and let's go for appropriate one. That's like who killed Laura Palmer?
Okay, yeah, that's Twin Peaks.
Twin Peaks, which, by all accounts, in the aftermath, everyone treats as a bad idea, to actually tell you.
But at the time, it was
thing.
heavily debated. It was a huge pop culture thing. People desperately wanted to know and had their own theories about it, which I think is what we're hoping to achieve here with Who is Yves Harlow.
Yeah, but I think the difference, though, is Who Killed Laura Palmer is the inciting incident of Twin Peaks. That's been, like, the bedrock question of the series from the word go.
It's literally the first thing that happens in the series is her body being found.
Yeah, and assuming that, of course, Pete didn't fake finding the body, and he actually did kill her all along.
Do not say anything bad about Pete.
This isn't true if you haven't seen Twin Peaks. I'm completely pulling that out of nowhere.
You can cross one suspect off your list there. It's not Pete.
It's not Pete. The killer is revealed, and there's actually a whole lot of complications about why the death even happened, but anyway. But I'd say it's the contrast to that of Yves is a mysterious quantity. I won't dispute this. However, she turns up in episode 1, and then she's just a super hacker in leather trousers. And then it's not until the Captain Toby show you get the CIA know who she is, and that kind of freaks her out a bit. And in between there's nothing. And it's aside from her decision to use pseudonyms, which we've repeatedly criticised of, this gets you caught constantly anagramming Lee Harvey Oswald.
Also, we even see whichever anagram of Lee Harvey Oswald we get in this one, they're getting increasingly unsubtle.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why Langley needed to write that down to figure it out. But mind you, he even said, if you add a few extra E's, so the anagrams are failing already.
Yeah. It's the I Am Lord, it's the Tom Riddle being an anagram of I Am Lord Voldemort. You have to add a whole load of extra letters in there. But yeah, I mean, I can see in another series, the idea of who Yves is would be kind of a good hook. But I think I'd equate it a bit also to like Star Wars. Like specifically The Force Awakens onwards.
Okay.
Because there was a debate when Force Awakens came out of Rey's parentage. As it would be, of course. Because everyone came down to, is she a Skywalker or is she a Kenobi?
Yeah.
That was a big thing. And so in those 3 films, even though they took the outside shot of, he's actually a Palpatine. Who saw that one coming?
Spoilers.
Spoilers. It's been a long time now. But the whole point was, though, that was still a mystery that's set up from the word go. And there's a significance to Rey being associated with one of these big families in the Star Wars universe. I think it's a bad idea to do that, but you can see where the mystery came from.
But at the same time, and I'm also going to tag off the back of Rey, a lot of people were unsatisfied because the counter-argument is that if you make her part of one of these huge Star Wars legacies, it takes away from her personal power.
Exactly.
She's not strong because she's just this random million chance of a Force user spring out of nowhere. She's strong because she's the Emperor's great-great-great-great-granddaughter, whatever the relationship is.
She said granddaughter.
Only granddaughter,
She's not that many generations down.
At the same time, that kind of also is what the film V for Vendetta tries to do.
Yes.
Where you have all these kind of her own beliefs and these hints through the movie that V, the guy in the mask, might be her father.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you don't find out for sure in the film. It leaves it ambiguous, but at the same time, it doesn't matter.
Yes. And in the comic, the whole point is it doesn't matter who's under the mask.
Yeah.
It was the point the comic at least is
It could
making.
be her father. It's likely not to be her father, but it doesn't really matter.
And the point, though, is that the mask is the important detail, not who's wearing it.
Yeah.
It's the persona is the important thing. And I would say, absolutely, in all these other things, and I would completely agree with the Star Wars one of, doing that route and the route they did choose was a mistake. Causes serious problems to Rey and her character and everything else about her. My illustrative point, though, is those things I understand how they developed and why people thought that. Yves is the woman in tight trousers who shows up to save the day. I know we've got is 1 or 2 hints that there's something significant to her, but giving us her name, unless she is the daughter of Cancer Man, will not blow our minds.
Or someone major where you reveal a name and it's like, but that's the president's surname.
Yeah, there are
that kind of things.
Yeah, at the same time, what can you do with that in the X-Files?
Mm.
Because X-Files has across such a long timeline, you have 3 or 4 presidents to deal with.
That's a good point. It's not as simple as saying Eves Clinton or something like that.
And it's like, you could suggest he's related to Krychek or Skinner. You can put someone's surname after her real name, but it's going to be the linkage is so brittle.
You even go of it could be someone whose name you don't know, like the well-manicured man.
Yeah, but then that name won't mean anything to you then.
But it won't at that point, but that's something you can build in. It's like, all right, why does his name not mean anything? That's what season 2 is going to build into.
It's true. But I think that's a risky way of doing it. That's where you actually lose people, isn't it?
It depends how you play it.
It does depend on how you play it. I still argue, though, that name mysteries can work, but you kind of have to put it in at the start. All we know is that she doesn't want her identity found. And we've also pointed out that she's doing a miserable job at it. Because this isn't how you do it.
Mm.
But yeah, I know that was one of the things they promised. And, well, I think actually one of the significant things is, and this is looking ahead to Jump the Shark, can you remember what Eve's name is? Because I'm pretty sure we do find out.
You do in Jump the Shark. It's something really mundane, but I can't remember what it is either.
Exactly. And that comes back to my point, though, is she's not hooked into another character and legacy thing or anything.
No.
It's a name, and that means nothing.
Mm.
And again, if this was V for Vendetta, you can make that have a point. But we're not doing V for Vendetta. So
I'm picturing of how you could do this and it make a point, and all that's coming to my head is the Fight Club, his name is Robert Paulson.
Yeah.
The name will eventually mean something.
Yeah, there are ways of doing this. They haven't done any of the groundwork they need to do to get there. It's, as you said, this is throwing everything out as a promise to try and get people to watch. But what they're going to have to do with that is not going to be satisfying.
Yeah.
And I think we go back to the problem that I think we had back in Bond, Jimmy Bond, is this series could have worked, but not like this.
I think if you stuck to the groundwork laid out by the 2 Lone Gunmen-centric episodes of The X-Files and by Pilot, you've got a template for a series. It obviously just scared them having to try and put forward this conspiracy-based series with no classically handsome characters in it.
Yeah, but you had Eves from the start, which is the thing that gets me about it, because you've made that point of Byers is the straight man and the face man. I know
it might be personal tastes, and he's not the classic American frontman, but I don't think Byers is repulsive.
No.
He held it as the kind of straight man and the romantic lead in Three of a Kind.
Exactly. It's one of the horrible things where you don't want to say it, but at the same time, there was a sense, at least in Doctor Who, that the companions weren't cast for the best of reasons, at least in the 60s and 70s. You know what I mean here.
I'm kind of thinking of the joke in Community as well, with the American version of it.
That's exactly it. That's the perceived mindset. Doctor Who, to its credit, did really strive for this, but I think choice of actresses and actors, there was a bias in one direction.
It was after a point, to be fair, because you're bearing in mind that
Susan was different.
And the original companions, you had the Doctor's granddaughter and her 2 teachers.
Exactly.
So you didn't go in for this, but after a while, it got to the point where, for the longest run, it was the Doctor and his attractive female companion.
Exactly. I mean, you don't want to feed into this kind of thing, but at least one of them did do a Playboy spread or something, posing with a Dalek. So this is not pulled out of nowhere. This is a genuine thing that happened. Is these women were not being cast necessarily for acting talent. And they were good, fine. They were good, yes.
Even the revival, I think, up until we got the female Doctor, you kind of had that element too. They weren't casting eye candy, but it was the concept of the spunky female protagonist from usually a lower class background.
Yes, although it is worth noting that Stephen Moffat, when he took control with the Matt Smith phase, is Amy Pond was cast. I think she actually went through the audition process and didn't get it, and he saw her afterwards.
Okay.
And then sort of pushed her through. And she has a lot of appeal to me, because things like Nebula, she went strength to strength in Guardians of the Galaxy. She got so much better very quickly. I must
admit that the first thing I ever saw her in was Doctor Who, and I didn't rate her.
No.
But when you see her in things like Oculus, she's fantastic.
Yeah, and so, as Nebula, she was not great in the first one, but 2 and 3, and the Christmas special, she's really good by that point.
I think she plays comedic characters like Nebula very well.
She does. She's really good at this when you give her the right script and the right direction.
But Oculus is a horror movie that's kind of faded to obscurity, and I can't recommend it more, really. It's so flipping good, and she's the female lead in that as well.
So, and that's that kind of double-edged sword of all this is they're not cast for the best reasons, and sometimes they really pull through and show you that, yes, they actually are really good. But I think we criticised it right at the start, though, is Yves was not doing a good job, and she might be slightly better now, but she's still not great. She's still a sexy woman with a British accent.
And occasionally you do these things where you've realised that maybe she's not quite feminine enough, like when she goes to the paternity thing with Frohickey and the one with the baby.
Yes. You see, I kept realising we could just, we'll talk about worst episodes, and Two Men in a Diaper just kept evaporating because it's the whole, I don't want to think about it at all, so even contemplating it.
Yes, no spoilers for my list at the end.
Yeah, I think yes. We didn't want it, of course, a lot, but...
Okay, what should we be talking about?
I don't know, but...
Back to the start, alien abduction.
Start from the start. I do not understand this alien abduction. Like, on any level, this doesn't make sense to me. Because faking an alien abduction is, in terms of X-Files, it has been done. It's not simple.
Or cheap.
I think there's the question of this room where Morris Fletcher has been fake abducted to. Well, actually, no. Start even further back. How do they do the light? Because you made a thing about sodium pentothal.
Yes, I did some research because I was fully aware that sodium pentothal, which is often called the truth serum, cannot possibly work the way it does in movies, where you take it and people immediately start answering whatever you tell them, honestly.
You can't resist telling the truth.
Sodium pentothal does have a very common usage in medicine, in the fact that it's the first drug they give you before you're anaesthetized, the one that starts to make you feel tired and a bit dopey.
Yeah.
So theoretically, sodium pentothal could be used as a truth serum because you're more likely to answer honestly just because your brain can't kind of create a lie. So you're going to say whatever floats into your slightly spacey brain immediately. However, it's not admissible in court because literally the people under this influence, you can't be sure they're telling the truth because they're out of it. They could just be talking absolute nonsense.
It's very interesting then that Vince Gilligan part-read this episode. Because that's a plot point at the end of season 2 of Breaking Bad. Walt goes into hospital for his treatment. He's given a drug. Scarlett asks where his phone is.
Oh, and it's the second phone. Yeah.
He says which one. So, there it is.
That's what you'd expect.
Yes.
Because, it's just purely because it makes you slow and stupid.
Yeah. And, Walter White was caught out by this. So, Vince, you will learn how this works.
Well, you often hear of it as a myth of people when they're going to surgery admitting to having an affair. And it's not always the case because, they don't know what they're saying.
Yeah.
It could be them admitting to the second lover because they don't realise who they're talking to. Or it could just be them replaying a dream or something that's just come into their head or anything.
Oh, yeah.
It's totally not something that can be trusted.
So, that's a big one. But, so we've got to get past that part because that's already a problem. But how do you fake the light source?
Without a helicopter.
Yeah, without a helicopter. So you've got to either hire one of these like movie cranes they put cameras on top of to get up high. Okay, so you've got that. Then you've got Fletcher on a soundstage, and that looks like an empty soundstage. So where the hell is that?
They had one right at the start when they did the
Japanese one.
Japanese one, yeah. Yeah,
but then they ran away and abandoned it. So okay, so maybe they found something in Washington DC.
But also from the outside source, us as the viewer, that looks a lot like how Mulder's abduction took place. How do they know this?
Yes, it's like, where did you get that idea for the chair and the hooks in his cheeks and everything? There's a lot of very specific X-Files detail in here that I appreciate the production staff said, hey, let's have a jab at the X-Files. And no one said, how do they know that?
Yeah.
How does anyone know that?
For the record, it is the chair from the Mulder thing.
That's even more
They have changed some bits to make it less brutal, so they kind of repainted it to remove bloodstains and things like that, and removed the bar that goes through Mulder's leg and things like that. Because, the only thing pinning him down is that weird cheek device.
There's a crotch thing as well.
There's a crotch thing that looks like the harness on a roller coaster.
Yeah.
And that cheek thing, which you think would leave a mark, but apparently doesn't.
Yeah. And, it's how do you do this? And it looks like a cheap UFO.
Yeah.
Because it's mostly black with a vision of the Earth. And the alien grey costume isn't fooling anyone. I don't understand why they thought it would. It works, I think.
read a hilarious comment to say that they had Frohickey kind of gesturing with his hands and stuff in a way that was consistent with Frohickey normally, so you'd know who it was.
Yeah.
It's like, hands up who didn't realise that was Frohickey in this scene.
Yeah, I didn't really. But also, okay, so there's a whole lot of complications around this. But one thing, though, I'm going to start on the whole physical presence thing is the Greys are meant to be spindly. This is one of the defining attributes of a Grey. So you put the shortest, stockiest guy into the alien suit, and not Langley.
Our kind of spindly guy.
Our spindly guy, the person who would actually have the right kind of physique for this. Although, based on the X-Files production notes, 9-year-old girls are your best Grey.
Yeah.
For some reason. That's some weird implications there. But wheeling back to that, we have to go back to EB as always. For the genesis of Lone Gunmen, this is where they started. They don't believe in aliens. What is this whole thing for? I mean, they didn't used to, and then they kind of did at the end of Requiem, despite never seeing anything. And then the Lone Gunmen series has had one possible alien abductee who they dismissed out of hand. That was Madam I Madam. Another episode I forgot existed. So, their whole thing, though, was Area 51 contains experimental aircraft. And yet they stage an alien abduction. And then Fletcher plays right into it. And I think, how did you read that? Because rewatching it again, it was he cannot be fooled by this terrible Halloween costume. And yet he's playing along as if it is.
I think he is fooled by it purely because they've injected him with sodium pentothal. Okay. He's going to believe anything at that point.
True, but he comes round and gets those soldiers together really fast.
Yeah. They also kind of torture him because whatever they do with that nose thing, it makes him howl.
Yeah, it's the guys. I mean, that's interesting for later on down the line in terms of how far is too far, isn't it?
I often think when I see scenes like this, it's the Mitchell and Webb sketch where they play Nazis, where he just stops halfway through and says, "Are we the baddies?" and then starts rationalising it. It's like, I've just looked at a hat, there's a picture of a skull on it.
Yeah, it's got little skulls in it.
But I always think about this when I see scenes like this where you've got like a inherently good character essentially torturing someone. Yeah. It's like, at what point do you step back and think, maybe we've gone a tad too far?
But I think it's what Fletcher says to them doesn't gel with Dreamland again. Because they say, what's the Mirror Project? And he says, oh, it's alien technology. But one of the jokes in Dreamland was the people running Area 51 do not know what the stuff is. They've got stuff that's assembled somewhere else that's shipped to them and they fly it around.
Yeah.
They don't actually know it's alien stuff at all.
No.
So that jars that Fletcher would say that to them. So I don't get that. And then, so the Frohickey has literally tortured a man they've restrained and kidnapped.
Yeah.
Oh my god. And then they do gloss over, okay, you've done this somehow, and I'm very dubious. How do you reverse this?
I'll also mention, and I'm glad the censors actually got to this.
Oh, yeah.
There is an instance that was cut, which involved one of them holding up an alien probe and it being very obviously a kind of slightly futuristic spray-painted sex toy. And I'm glad the censors got to that one because I don't like the implication they could have used it.
No, it's like, what on earth is going on?
There is a comment from Jimmy where he gets a bit fixated asking Mulder about probings later, which I imagine would have fed from the scene.
Yeah, there's almost certainly a link up to that.
Yeah.
But, yeah, and then, okay, so they've put Morris we are very vague on how we abandoned Morris after the abduction. Because there's some questions about that.
It has to be somewhere close as well, because they stopped them in the street afterwards.
Yeah, and then...
So, from the speed they pounced on him after his abduction, you've got to assume that wherever they took him is fairly close.
Yes. But then it also calls into question of, was he fooled by the Grey if he can turn it around that fast? Because he should be having the after effects of sodium pentothal or whatever on him.
Unless the MIBs have some way of just clearing your head with an injection.
It could be.
You can't discount it.
I can't discount it. But... it does lead to Morris, or someone working with Morris, has to be the person who sent the Romeo 61 email, which means this was all an elaborate setup.
I assume it has to be Morris. From what we learn in the episode, it can't be anyone else.
Yes. Then I'd like to offer you the chance to say what you said to me about why this episode is deeply infuriating and pointless.
Oh, because I could have cut Yves in half the time.
Yes. Because I think also they could have caught her in episode 1 if they were looking for her.
My argument, to recount my argument to you at the time, was why don't they just stake out the Lone Gunmen officers, because Yves pops around at least twice a week?
An excellent question. And for that, we have no answers. Because it's not like she's covering her tracks, because I refuse to believe the Lone Gunmen are the only people in the world who notice someone using anagrams of Lee Harvey Oswald.
Terrible, terrible anagrams.
Terrible, terrible anagrams that stop making sense very quickly.
In this one, they had to add all those extra letters.
They did, those extra E's. But yeah, it's that this whole elaborate double bluff plan where Morris intentionally got himself fake abducted by aliens, which the Lone Gunmen don't believe in, because we'll get to that in a second.
Fake abducted and tortured by aliens.
Yeah.
I'm not backing down.
Just to capture Yves, who we don't know why we care. Other than she's the Lone Gunmen's friend, but then they seem to oscillate very wildly on whether they consider her friend or acquaintance or nemesis.
There's even that moment in this episode where they tell Yves, you've got to come with us or we're going to kill them, and there's a pause.
Yeah.
So you have that momentary doubt of, oh, does Yves actually care about them this much to risk herself?
I would say one of the problems with that is the Lone Gunmen haven't really given a reason for her to like them. Jimmy has. I'll give him that. The whole bond between Jimmy and Yves, as much as I really do question why it's in here, I understand why they have some kind of connection. The rest of them, why does she care? Because they've been nothing but basically horrible to her the entire time.
Maybe you could argue back to the bit where the Lone Gunmen almost die in the explosion in Like Water for Octane.
Yeah.
In which Yves' first instinct is, now they're dead, let's cut our losses.
Yeah.
And she sees how Jimmy gets worked up, and Jimmy makes quite a compelling argument about why they're her friends too.
Yeah.
At which point she gets down and starts to help him. So I think you've got the seeds there for Yves actually grudgingly does like and respect them.
Fair. But I think it's like the observation that no one has a character arc is that none of this has been built up to.
No.
This hasn't been a thing that's progressed through the series and now we're here.
I will say, in fairness, nobody gets a character arc really in the first season of The X-Files either.
No, I'm aware there is a problem with that. But then I think the only justification I could really come up with is that Mulder is still given the seed of something. He has a goal.
But Scully has nothing.
Scully has nothing. We did go over this a few episodes ago where it was the disparity between the two of them. And it is a problem.
Really, for Scully, her arc kicks in when she's abducted, because then she's got stakes in this. At first, she's put on there to debunk Mulder, but that falls away so quickly, and she kind of flounders until the little ascension arc.
Yeah. But I think the problem with that is that, while you could say the same thing here, and that Yves is the one with the character arc, is that she doesn't either.
No.
Neither does Jimmy. It's always nice to see Kimmy.
I love him.
I know, and in a theoretical better version of the Lone Gunmen, you wouldn't keep having him as a cameo, you'd have actually put him into the main cast.
Yeah.
I understand again, though, why you didn't, because you're coming back into the same problem again of you've got the unattractive characters again, and you can't convince the people who are going to look at the show of like 3 pasty nerds and sort of say, I don't want to watch this.
And say, we'd actually like to add this 4th pasty nerd as well.
Exactly. Because it's one of the things where you can't really get past, and I know people should be better than this, and TV executives are notorious for underestimating people, but you can't ignore in the X-Files. You had the geek who was Mulder, who was classically attractive, and you had his accomplice, who was also classically attractive, and swiftly became a pin-up as well.
I've got a story for this one, and to plug myself, it's something that you will have heard about if you've watched my streams, particularly my streams of the Yakuza series on PlayStation.
Yes, I think I know where you're going with this.
Where they completely misjudged the popularity of one minor character and didn't find out till a convention after the release of the first game. So in the Yakuza series, which of course is slightly comedic but is a story that centres around a former Yakuza member in Japan, the main character is Kazuma Kiryu, who is your classically attractive, broad-shouldered, powerful, strong, stoic character. And then you have Majima, Goro Majima, who is a gremlin, essentially. He's this small, kind of weaselly sort of man. He has quite a shrill voice. He's very sporadically violent, although he can occasionally do very altruistic things. He even goes too far because he's decided Kiryu is his rival, that he'll do things like hide in the sewer to jump out and surprise him. And when they went to the first convention, they thought the female fans in particular would be wild for Kiryu. And then discovered the fact when they went to the convention, saw the kind of arts that we're making and the reactions that they got in panels and stuff, that the female fan base is just obsessed with Majima.
Yeah.
Which I think is what the kind of thing people overlook when we've said that the American studios said, oh, nobody would like a series with these kind of nerdy characters. It's like, yeah, but that's what they said in Yakuza, and the endearing thing is Majima.
Yes. Well, I think I've heard a lot in terms of comics as well, because it's that whole thing of Robin/Nightwing is more people's idealized thing to look at than like Batman himself. And it all comes down to it's power fantasies as written by men, as power fantasies written by women, and then attractiveness written by men and attractiveness written by women. Is the two of them, there's overlap, but then focus is not necessarily where you think it is.
Yeah.
And if you're not in the mindset of being attracted to men, what you think is attractive is not necessarily what the audience wants.
It's also, on a very generalised basis, is when we consider what women think attractive, the people who are considering this are often men.
Exactly.
Especially in the 90s and early 2000s when the Lone Gunmen was making, these are largely male studio boards. They're saying, yep, women will find that attractive without actually consulting a woman.
I am fully prepared to believe there are people who really lust over Byers, Langley, Furuki, Kimi. Jimmy just goes, is like he's presumably just a default, or what people assume people obsess over. I'm sure there are people who really do fantasize about the Lone Gunmen.
Yes.
Yeah. But as far as Fox's marketing research or whatever was prepared to find or investigate, they did not represent an appreciable segment of the audience for them to actually keep them as focus.
Probably because they were girls.
Probably because they're girls.
Now, from what I've seen of the fan base on Twitter, a lot of the fans of particularly Byers are female. You don't see so many people who are, obviously male discussing this. But I remember I once tweeted, and I can't remember what the context was, a post about Byers being attractive, and it got a lot of female interest.
Yeah. What the creatives assume is going to be appealing is not necessarily. Because I think, anecdotally, and we'll get back on track in a second.
Yeah.
Dragon Age, they only found out after a while they had an enormous female fan base, and they hadn't targeted it or marketed towards it, but they'd wound up with it anyway.
Okay.
Because it's one of these weird things where what you do, you may aim a certain direction, but who picks it up is not necessarily who you think is going to. Because art, of course, is interpretive. You don't know what you've said and how other people can interpret it.
Yeah.
And so you might be thinking you're writing for the 18 to 30-year-old male audience, and then the female people swoop in instead and say, nope, we're here. This is ours now. So, but it's nice to see Kimi.
Yeah. He's great. He was Stuart in The Frighteners, which is completely underrated. One of my favourite films, and I hope everyone's seen it.
Romeo 61, as a concept, should not have fooled them. It's two ways. It's the whole, they should have been more skeptical. On the other hand, it is a conspiracy. It is at least in the conspiracy theory circles again. We're back in the right kind of area.
It's that old adage, though, which should be doubly true if you're a paranoid person anyway, is if something is too good to be true, seems too good to be true, it usually is.
Yeah, and to try and imply one government organization did the JFK assassination and every other significant disaster, known or actual terrorist act.
It's not even a government organisation, because they also mentioned Lockerbie, which was in Scotland.
Yes, it's a weird, very grab bag of stuff. And I think it's 3 Mile Island, and it's the whole, while conspiratorial thinking leads to questioning the official story, I've read the official story about 3 Mile Island, and it's kind of, okay, I see exactly how that happened and why that happened, and dear God, who put that thing in there?
But wherever you've got a big disaster like Chernobyl, you'll always get people saying, well, why did this occur? And just spreading those little seeds of doubts, even if it was an accident.
Yeah, and Lone Gunmen is still from an era where that was actually kind of fun to think about and talk about. And we live in a world where it's not fun anymore. Yeah,
we've probably mentioned that before, but conspiracy theories aren't cute anymore.
No, they used to be fun. And I think, I can't remember whose video I was watching on this, but they made the point of conspiracy theories used to go to, and usually wind up with a sci-fi explanation on it. It would be aliens or some kind of mind control or something like that.
I'll use my favourite as an example then of the Dyatlov Pass incident.
Yes, the one that has a perfectly sensible explanation that people don't like.
It does have a personally rational explanation that people largely reject.
Yeah.
Because it's such a creepy incident, and if you take all the facts individually, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Go look it up. I could talk about this for ages. There are also some great video games like Collat that kind of go into the story of it as well. But it was a disaster that resulted in some people going missing in a very remote mountain region called the Dyaltov Pass. Do read it, it's super creepy.
Yeah. And try not to get too hung up on the explanations, because there's some very sensible ones.
And there are some really, really creepy sci-fi ones.
Yes, and that really stupid film explanation.
We don't talk about that film.
And Kimmy obviously gets freaked out, as you would do if you actually are tangling with people who can do all this.
Mm.
At the same time, it's like Kimmy can just hack into things effortlessly now, and it feels really odd.
I feel Kimmy's neutrality should be more what we're expecting from Eve, to be honest.
Yes.
Because Kimmy essentially has to be bullied into doing anything because he doesn't want to risk his own neck.
Yeah, that's kind of like they've split the characterization you'd expect for Eve across two characters for some bizarre reason.
Yeah, Kimmy, you get the sense, like that scene where the sharply dressed man said, "Oh, come with me if you want them to live." Kimmy wouldn't have come with them.
No, he would have fled.
Yeah.
Very sensibly.
Interestingly, Spotnitz has said that if they did get a second season, the opening would have been Jimmy and Kimmy having to find some way to rescue the 3 lone gunmen from their predicament.
Yes, I mean, we're going to shelve the actual implications of the end of this until next week, because what Nothing Unusual Happened Today is going to give us
Nothing important happened today.
Sorry, is going to give us a lead-in to question how that cliffhanger resolves, because it's not done well. But we'll get to that. Fletcher is an awkward thing to discuss these days, at least at this point in the series.
Yeah,
because I actually kind of like Lone Gunmen hanging around with him. I like it a lot more if Dreamland 2 hadn't happened.
I don't know how much I went into at the time, but I have a big issue with episodes that delete their continuity.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I know exactly what you're saying. I was going to say the really up-to-date one I can think of is Loki in the MCU.
Yes.
And while he is around and he's got his own spin-off series and everything, he is not the one who went through Thor Ragnarok.
No. What I am going to cite is what I will call the Donna Noble effect, which is referring to a companion of Doctor Who. I almost said a recent companion, but when I'm saying
No.
recent, I mean at least 15 years ago. But Donna Noble was played by Catherine Tate. When introduced, I'm not sure how to describe this to an American audience. It's what in the UK we call a chav. But it's kind of like our equivalent of a valley girl, I guess. It's somebody who's very towny, very loud-mouthed, usually portrayed as having low intelligence, snappy back, all bark, no bite, that kind of character, isn't it? But she becomes the Doctor's companion. At first, she's kind of irritating and just opinionated and frequently has to be told to, think about others and not herself. But she really grows throughout the entire series. But she's only the companion for one series. And when we get to the end, we have an event where she absorbs too much of the Doctor's power and it starts to kill her, to spoil the series. And they're told the only way that they can save her is to wipe all of her memories with the time of the Doctor. So, which they do, of course, to save her life, but it means the fact that she will never be that person again. She goes back to being the loud-mouthed, snappy, opinionated person and loses 13 plus episodes of development.
Yeah, well, you miss out the bit that made it additionally stupid, I felt, was that she can never see the Doctor or her memories are complete.
Yeah, that's right. So, they even erase the fact that, because I think her grandpa says something like, but how could you do this to her? It's like a lobotomy. She became such a better person when she was with you. And they just decide that's better for her.
Yeah. And it's really odd, especially at this point. I mean, obviously we haven't watched Doctor Who for a while, but it's the fact that was a Russell T Davies era stuff, and that while we all got very sick of what he was doing to the series, we can appreciate it a lot more now, but that's still a really low point.
It infuriated me because I grew to like Donna. Like many people, I started off thinking, God, this character's irritating. Can we go back to the old companions? And she really grows on you through the series, and you really, really root for her. In fact, she eclipses the Doctor most of the time. And therefore, to give a character, to use the term lobotomy again, to essentially develop this female character and then lobotomize her, it's worse than killing her off, to be honest.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we got with Morris, because in Dreamland, he had a little arc where he came to appreciate his wife and family, and then they erase it, and he goes back to just being obnoxious Morris again.
Yes, I mean, I would like to think that the one at the end of Dreamland 2 wouldn't be cheating on his wife anymore.
But he is.
But he is. And it's also, though, it's Dreamland 2 revealed, and you at least sort of point out there is a air of ambiguity on this, of whether what Morris was actually telling the truth when he said to Lone Gunmen, I give you your stories.
Yeah, I still believe, based on his personality, he could just be messing with them.
He could. My only problem with that is this comes as he's holding up one of the front pages, and it's Saddam's Mandroid Army, a story that you would find on the Weekly World News or something.
Yeah.
So, and it's just, I know it's a sight gag, and I know it's a comedy episode, but to have Lone Gunmen publish that story does such damage to their credibility in any field. How did you get duped in this?
Mm.
Just think about the words you have typed on the headline and stop and say, is this real?
Yeah.
Because I don't believe it. But Morris is certainly written in this episode, though, as if the events of Dreamland 2 are accurate.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't need an introduction to Lone Gunmen. I mean, to be fair to them, I would actually say it's probably accurate that the intelligence agencies do know who they are, despite their best efforts. Because we had things like Memoirs of a Cigarette Smoking Man, where he can just get through their encryption.
Yeah.
At the touch of a button. So I can fully believe they know exactly who they are. But I would also imagine that they think they're not worth putting any effort into. They think they've got close to the truth. They haven't got close to anything that's actually they need to protect.
And that it would look more sus if you wipe out someone like this.
Yeah, and also they're probably they're probably rendered in the same way that Mulder was described a few times, of that you can use them as a distraction and point them in the right direction. They'll go and make a big noise while you're doing something else.
Yeah.
And that attitude to Lone Gunmen, like, I can believe Morris would feed them some stories, and they might be true stories, but they're not the ones they care about.
Yeah.
That would have been fine. But to say they print whatever he thinks up is a problem.
So you think it would be better to handle him a bit more like the X-Files handled Mr. X?
Yes.
Where Mr. X
absolutely.
will sometimes dangle the carrot for Mulder. It's not always something useful. Sometimes it's to move Mulder to a certain position he needs him to be in.
Exactly. Yeah, you work for me, I don't work for you.
Yeah.
And I can see that possibly being an idea at some point in Dreamland, and that then being why they didn't go with it, because it's a case of, he's Mr. X again. We can't do it again. But that's more the kind of Morris Fletcher I'd have wanted.
At the same time, I could have bought them doing it again just because Fletcher is a very different character to Mr.
Yes.
X.
He has entirely different motives.
You wouldn't feel they were treading the same path.
No. So I think it's possibly, because it's these three again who wrote Dreamland. And I think it's more the consciously trying to make it a funny episode.
Yeah.
It should be, Lone Gunmen working with Fletcher should actually be quite fun. Because this is someone who actually knows everything. And I don't know what you could have done with this, but going to him to try and find out more, I kind of see how they've got there. Quite why Fletcher has let himself be vulnerable like this again, I don't get. And the sting operation of that disc as well being in the hotel safe is, they're Men in Black. Why is he carrying it round like that? What's the point? Why is it in Washington, D.C. and he works in Nevada? Because there are so many actual holes in the story when you start picking at it. The Lone Gunmen should be sort of stop and saying, yeah, what is on this disc that you're trying to do?
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing about it, though, is if Yves is telling the truth, which is a huge, huge assumption, it's both kind of revelatory and mundane what's on that disc. If it's a list of people they've brainwashed, that's a text file that has a list of names and addresses. And without some signing document saying, we took this person and convinced them they had been abducted by aliens for... Why are they doing this?
I guess your only point of interest would be if you could see the list and if it put doubt, like if Mulder's name was on it or something like that.
Yeah, and I think, given the fact that Yves apparently has read it, and the fact that she went to Mulder directly, that feels like an insinuation they could have actually made.
Yeah.
And didn't.
Maybe it's what they were going to build into.
It could be. But it should be more fun seeing them pal around. Eventually we get Weapon of Choice. Which I don't quite understand why it's in here, but...
Twice.
it does actually work, and it's a nice, nice upbeat song. More seriously, though, then I read a comment from, I think it was Spotnet, on the bit where they search Eve's alleged hotel room. And it's the good. How old were you, Spotnet, when you wrote this?
If it's the comment I'm thinking of, I think it was Shaban that said it.
Shaban?
Yeah.
But it's still a case of how old were you when you wrote this?
Was it the one about it living out every adolescent man's fantasy?
Yeah, it's a case of what the hell, man?
I presume you were an adolescent man once. Was this ever your fantasy?
No. I mean, admittedly, I feel I fall into some stereotypes, but it's the pouring through the laundry thing. It's a case of this is, it could be a tangent, but it's one of these things where if you look at media from like the 70s and 80s, I think primarily, there used to be a whole big thing about bust, hips, waist on the women. They always read out 3 numbers.
Oh yeah.
Those 3 dimensions, and people would sort of keep listing them in all kinds of things. And I saw a comment on Twitter like a few years ago when someone said, "Oh, yeah, in the 70s and 80s, you'd tell a man 3 numbers and he'd sort of just have a nosebleed."
So I presume there's some sort of golden ratio they're looking for here.
Well, I think it's the whole, they wanted the bust to be as big as possible, the waist to be as narrow as possible, and the hips to be somewhere in the middle.
There's some weirdly shaped women in men's imaginations there.
That's one of the things. But then it's the lingerie thing of, I may be hopelessly basic and not very adventurous, but the lingerie feels to me more interesting when it's on the woman, not in the drawer.
I can see that, yep.
I don't know if I'm crazy here, because otherwise it's the whole, you pick up the lingerie and say, "Now imagine her wearing this." It's like, okay. Do you know what? There's an extra step here you're going through. I don't understand.
You're saying that the kind of discarded article of lacy clothing is not as tantalising as that said lacy clothing being on an attractive woman.
Yeah.
Sounds crazy to me.
Oh, I know. Like, Furuki, there are catalogues where you can see this on women models. And dear God, there's an internet where you can look at people with no clothes on really easily.
We have, of course, always established that Frohiki is horny, but at the same time,
yeah. I mean, this is a trope kind of thing where this is, I think, 10 Things I Hate About You even kind of laid on it once briefly.
Mm.
And there is a cliche in films and TV where men get embarrassed looking at women's underwear if it's not on the person. And you're going to go, what? It's clothing.
Gotta admit, as a woman, bikinis I find baffling in the fact that you can have a bikini that covers less than the underwear does, yet the underwear is apparently the tantalising one.
Yes. Well, yeah. No, I do vaguely understand the logic. It is kind of a stretch, but there is a sort of logic to it. Admittedly, I'm not in any kind of position to know how this actually affects your real life, but it's the whole, you choose to wear the bikini for being seen in public.
So the underwear is my secret.
Yes.
That only select people can see.
Yes, or you're embarrassed by the state of it because you're wearing the old comfortable stuff.
There is a thing, and it's very much a northern thing I have discovered, 'cause as you can tell from my desirable accent from the north of England, is my mother would always show the deepest concern about the state of your underwear in case you were hit by a car and it was the thing the paramedics would see and how embarrassing that would be. Which in my head, I'd always been more concerned about the fact that I'd just been hit by a car, but...
Weirdly enough.
But yeah, it's a very northern thing of a certain generation is to always make sure you're wearing your best underwear in case you get hit by a car.
Yeah. We've taken a very, very weird route here, haven't we? Okay, so but anyway,
we're getting towards Valentine's Day. It feels appropriate.
It does, okay. The weird continuity detail to hang on to this is Langley is covered in blue paint, and he can't get that stuff off. So just hang on to that for no particular reason.
I'm sure it won't be relevant later.
Yep. I think by the end of the episode, there's something very weird going on with the deception. Because as far as we can tell, Eve stole Morris's car. However, in retrospect, it's presumably she drugged him and left some way out of the hotel that no one noticed. Because I'm not clear on the surveillance camera if they saw her getting into Morris's car or didn't. Because if they didn't, they're just following his car because he said it was stolen, and that's just another, he's telling them what they want to hear, and they've tracked her car to the hotel. As
embarrassing as it is to admit, I think Fletcher's recount of what Eves did to him seems legit. That feels like the kernel of truth.
I think that's actually what happened. Mm. Her stealing his car, though, doesn't seem to be true, because if that's not her hotel room, how did that switch happen?
Yeah.
Where did she switch out? Because unless she's lying to Jimmy, because can we trust anything Eve says ever?
Not really, but I think if she's going to be honest with anyone, it'd be Jimmy.
Yes, I'd agree with you on that one. So, and then I think that's part of what makes it frustrating, because in film TV, there are certain ways of doing the late on revelation reworks everything that came before it. In this one, knowing the Lone Gunmen walking around a staged scene to find that invoice from the Phoenix Atlantic, it doesn't feel... You don't feel like, oh, okay, my understanding of the episode has changed. It's another nail in this episode is pointless coffin.
In doing it better then, The Unusual Suspects does the kind of carries a soze thing at the end.
Yes.
When you find out who Holly actually is.
Yes. Yeah, that's much better. And that reworks, that explains a whole lot of inconsistencies early on, and you sort of go, oh, okay. And then she does appear to be on the level, as far as we're aware from everything going forward. She is telling the truth from that point onwards.
Yeah.
So yeah, that worked a lot better. Rather than because I think the other problem is that it's such a clunky clue to just give her the Swiss bank account for Phoenix Atlantic.
Yeah.
And then I'm fascinating onto the corporation. But more to the point, why? Because I realise they've got to get them into a trap, basically, so Eves will have to come in and rescue them. It feels odd to sort of go into that. Well, again, just why didn't they just put them into a government black site and tempt Eves in that way? It's the level of luring them in. It feels too much for what they're doing. And to the extent of having these fake architectural plans of the building, and then, correct me if I'm wrong though, architectural plans, I don't know if you'd know, but a vault, they probably have a space on the plan saying vault goes here. And not, this vault will have a numeric keypad, this vault will have a wheel lock.
Good point, yeah. But I do know, and the only reason I vaguely know this is because I watched a documentary about the serial killer H.H. Holmes, that you tend to build a building around a vault, not vice versa. So I don't know if that would affect anything on your plans whatsoever.
But yeah, that's a good point about H.H. Holmes, though, and I don't know, it's the vault thing, it feels right, but there's a tendency in the X-Files and the Lone Gunmen to have this room that we can't see and we don't know what's inside it has all the answers in the world.
Mm.
And to be fair to the X-Files, we thought we knew what that room was. One at the end of Pilot, and the one at the end of The Truth. No, not The Truth. The End. No, not The End.
Oh,
my flask.
The Indiana Jones Raiders room.
That one. The one that Mulder gets into as part of Redux 2. Yes. Or Redux 1. Redux 1. We thought that room had all the answers in the world, and if Mulder eventually got in there, everything would be solved. That didn't happen.
I think this carrot that's been given to the Lone Gunmen this time, my big problem is that you can't do that in a serious series.
No.
The comparison I won't get into much now because it's a MacGuffin in The Lost Art of Forehead Sweat, which is a later season... Season 11 comedic episode of The X-Files. It's brilliant and we'll talk about it when we get to it.
Yep.
But the MacGuffin in that is supposedly a object which contains all the answers to every question Mulder has, which is done for comedic effect. Here, we've got the same MacGuffin done supposedly seriously.
Yeah. And I think it's Mulder's also been guilty of it as well, because I can't help but think back to Anasazi when the Thinker gives him the digital tape and Mulder just says, this has all the answers I've ever been looking for.
Yeah.
He does not know what's on the tape. And it's one of these ones where if you actually look at records, I mean, I've done this in my place of work, I think you have as well, is if you access a file system and are looking for information, you have to know where to look for it, otherwise you're going to get reams and reams and reams of Excel printouts and exports and things. Reports that mean nothing to you and just pages of data that, unless you know what it is, it's worthless. It's not going to be neat confessions from Lee Harvey Oswald is the first entry saying, I didn't shoot JFK, signed Lee Harvey Oswald.
And then a photo of Cancer Man sat down in the sewer or whatever it was.
Yeah, that kind of thing. That's not going to be page one of your report. So, yeah, it's a carrot. As you said, it's a carrot that's come up before. It's a carrot that's going to come up again. It's not used desperately well. I mean, you may as well say it's the warehouse from the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark. is somewhere in the X-Files universe. And there's an odd thing with Jimmy as well, though, because we're coming towards the end of the episode, but it's the whole Jimmy is the moral center to the Lone Gunmen. I don't know how I feel about it, but I can kind of see why.
Because he's not smart enough to lie?
For one part, yes. And I think also he's got to be kept in a state where, as long as you can overlook that he's too stupid to live, Eve would be attracted to him for his morals. Why? Because she's a deeply corrupt and...
She's a deeply corrupt person. He's essentially lawful good.
Yeah. And for some reason that's appealing to her.
Yeah.
But as much as I've complained about it for previous episodes, I do kind of like Eve's, Jimmy, and Kimmy as a little trio.
Yeah.
And I would say I would like that in a theoretical series 2, going into that more would have been kind of fun.
Yeah.
At the same time, I realised reading through the synopsis that even the fan writers do something very interesting. Because it's Lone Gunman and Jimmy. He is not considered part of the group.
Well, he's not.
He's not, but he should be.
Yeah.
I don't understand why he's not. It's very odd to keep him on the outside like that. Because, like, Cap and Toby show, as I complained about, that scene where they tell him how they look for stories should be episode 2 or 3.
Yeah.
It's really too late. And that's really weird.
You also have examples which should come later, like Diagnosis Jimmy, where he does solve a mystery by himself.
Yes.
If you structured the series differently by that argument, you'd have Captain Toby quite early on and Diagnostic Jimmy quite late, because that's him proving his worth.
Yeah, and it does kind of underscore that this production, I don't know if it was troubled so much as something very odd was happening. I do wonder if they were strained between writing for the X-Files and writing for Lone Gunmen, and that was causing the problems. Because, yeah, despite the fact that, Chris Carter, Spotnitz, Gilligan, and Shaban are the executive producers, none of them seem to have an overview of the series or an idea about how it's going to work, because it's very piecemeal, bitty.
It should be noted that 2 series, of course, were filming in unison as well. That's why you only get one scene of David Duchovny in this one.
I mean, we could talk about David Duchovny's cameo.
That one scene is actually filmed across 2 locations, because a lot of that, like a parking lot, had to be filmed in Vancouver. But because they were filming the X-Files in LA, they just had to ship Jimmy's actor down to LA to film the couple of shots where he's actually stood with David Duchovny in a parking lot in LA.
Movie magic. At the same time, though, well, I don't know if it's nice to see Mulder anymore, because Mulder has proven himself to be a deeply tiresome individual at this point. But it's kind of fun cameo. At the same time, you could have cut this and lost nothing.
He doesn't add anything to the episode, really.
No, in fact, I thought his cameo was going to be the answer phone message, because all we have to know is Eves is trying to pass the information to him.
Yeah. It could have been that you could have therefore saved Mulder for the opening cameo of season 2.
Yeah.
When he's finally got this information from Eves or something.
Yes, I think so. And it's odd that Skinner is handled so much better.
Yeah.
Skinner's actually actively used in the story. So Jimmy has been with Lone Gunmen for an unspecified amount of time, but the Lone Gunmen have never mentioned they have this guy funding them now, to Mulder.
No.
They think it'd come up a conversation, or Mulder would drop by the office and see him. And Mulder should also be say, okay, he's funding a newspaper. Is he making any demands of you? Is he sort of saying you want to do this story rather than this story? Is he influencing your output now that he's funding the newspaper?
Yeah.
Because you had an interesting, different way of running this episode.
Oh, I wanted it to be Jimmy's twist, yeah.
Because it's an awkward one to do, but it would at least explain why he's that bad. There's a lot of shots.
I've got to admit, I was thinking of it on the basis, and I've mentioned it once this episode already, of Verbal Kint in Usual Suspects.
Yeah.
I'm going to spoil Usual Suspects now.
It's too old.
But in the basis of that movie, Verbal Kint is being interviewed as a potential member of this gang as to the identity of their leader, who's called Kaiser Soze. And the entire movie works off the basis of you anticipate Verbal is a reliable narrator because he seems a bit simple, he seems very honest, he's got a visible disability as well, which lures people into a bit of a false sense of security. And at the end of the movie, the big twist is, of course, that he's lying through his teeth and he's been Kaiser Soze the entire time. And I thought we could do a similar thing with Jimmy, in the fact that Jimmy is too stupid to live. We've been criticising this for the entire series. turns out he's actually the mastermind at the end. He is the Romeo 61 member. He's actually massively competent. And you just have that moment at the end where it switches off and you, at the viewer, realise you've been duped by Jimmy. In the same way that once you know who Kaiser Soze is, Verbal Kimp's mannerisms completely change.
The thing that makes Usual Suspects an interesting or enjoyable film is you can reflect on or rewatch the film and then it all fits together how this story is spun out of nothing.
It's like you were saying earlier, it's a film where once you know the secret, it completely changes your viewing of the film.
Yes.
Sadly, it means it's a film that you can't have that initial surprise the first time, because I'd say that a majority of people watching it did not realise the twist.
No. But I would still say I'll happily watch The Usual Suspects again. I mean, I don't think it loses too much from knowing how it pans out. I think it works perfectly well as a thriller, and there's always the debatable point about exactly how much of anything is actually true, because it has to be... I think the only way you can do it is you have to take what he tells the detective as not true, but any third-person depictions of a scene you have to take as true, otherwise basically you can't say, well, I don't know how much of the film happened.
Yeah.
In this one, but for that theory for Jimmy, I think Diagnosis Jimmy is probably one of your biggest stumbling blocks, because you've got a whole lot of hospital shenanigans with no one around.
Yeah.
And that's a commitment to the bit that's going a bit far. But I do prefer it as an outcome.
Yeah. I just think it's the whole... Purely because you'd expect Yves to betray them.
Yes.
You would never suspect Jimmy to betray them.
And it does explain things like why he'd want to fund them, why he'd actually be bothered with all this, why he'd try and steal them away from this case. Yeah, there's a lot of things.
Yeah.
And he can still be hunting for Yves, and there'll be some reason why it took this long to spring the trap. I don't know what that is. Shaban, that's your job. Gilnitz, that's your job. Come on. This is your thing to do.
It also feeds in well to the conspiratorial nature of the Lone Gunmen, because if Jimmy turns out to be a plant, you can't trust anybody.
Yes. And also, it's a failing on their part of they were not keeping up their paranoia enough. They let someone in, and they shouldn't have done.
Which then would feed into the attitudes of the character for the next arc.
Yes. Yeah. Sadly, we don't get that serious. And so the episode ends with a to be continued, and it has an asterisk beside it, because we know the to be continued is kind of there are two parts to this. Is the continuation has a very long time gap before it comes in, and we can't remember most of it.
It's not that huge. It's maybe 15 episodes into the next season of the X-Files.
That's still a decent chunk of time.
But yeah, we'll get to it in chronological order, but the episode is called Jump the Shark.
Yeah. I think the problem is that it's when you heard that Millennium was the final conclusion to Millennium, the TV series, and that Jump the Shark is the same thing as Lone Gunmen, you kind of go, but that wasn't a great episode of the X-Files.
Spotnitz purely said it's because they felt bad. Like we said, they threw everything they could to get a second season. They had to end it on a cliffhanger because of that. They didn't get their second season. And he felt he'd let the fans down, so he wanted at least to wrap it up to some degree.
Yeah, and okay, we have to save a lot because there's a lot to say about how they do that. But
it's something you just need to put a pin in and bear that in mind when we get to Jump the Shark.
Yes. But one thing we will say is there's a persistent kind of... The closest thing we've got to a running thing through the series is who is Yves? Oh, it's not so much who is Yves as what is her name, because who she is does not seem to be that much of a mystery.
However, she is deeply concerned about people learning her true name.
Yes. But who she is easy because she's a mercenary. I mean, we have a mercenary with a heart of gold who she's trying to repress that part of it. That's fine.
But at the same time, mercenaries tend to be mercenaries for a reason.
Yes. But we know she will bend whatever ethos she had to do stuff for Jimmy and Lone Gunmen.
I think it's at least the way she's initially set up is Yves likes money. Yves will do everything she can to get the money in the Fujiko Mine sort of style. Yves won't go to the length of actually letting them get hurt to get it.
Yes.
That's where the heart of gold comes in. It's like, she will steal from them, she won't hurt them.
Yeah, but she'll portray herself as someone who doesn't care.
Yeah.
There was a moment that made me really laugh in this episode when I think it was Fletcher was trying to make out that Yves is like one of the most dangerous people you could know.
Yeah. Her literal kung fu's best, at least.
Oh, yeah, but it's a case of, I don't think this dangerous assassin would dress up as a white trash American trailer park woman to distract guards to slip Jimmy a communication device in prison.
Or pair it with Frohiki to go to a kind of postnatal class.
Yeah, or just the tango stuff in general.
Yeah.
And she certainly would not have helped the government raid the people smuggling bear gizzards or whatever it was.
She did do that because she thought there was a reward.
She did. But it's the whole that you as the audience can't buy into what Fletcher's saying, because unlike Jimmy, where we could buy, if your idea had gone to pass, you can just about buy that as why he did everything. But Eve's, that doesn't read right, because why would she? When she could be doing all this cool assassination weird stuff.
I guess when you're thinking the lines of the most dangerous woman in the world, I'd expect someone more like Amanda Waller in the DC universe, The Wall.
Yeah, someone, and even as much maligned as it was, I didn't like it at all. Suicide Squad, her attitude in that was pretty much what I would expect. She was no nonsense, you will do this or you will be killed.
And doesn't care for anyone individually.
No.
They're all just cannon fodder. In my head, that is a depiction of the most dangerous woman in the world.
Yes, I completely agree with that one. Yeah. Do you have anything else for this episode?
No, I think you've covered everything.
Very thoroughly. Right, so
season wrap-up.
Season wrap-up. This was disappointing. Well, it's no, it's disappointing in the really infuriating way of it's based on the pilot, it's based on Three of a Kind, it's based on Unusual Suspects. You can absolutely see the series this could have been.
Yeah.
And that's not what we got. And I think that's the frustration of, we thought we knew the kind of series we were going to get because we'd been showing it 3 times. And then the actual execution, you add an extra character in and just disrupt the dynamic of everything.
I think that's my big problem, is it has that feel of studio executives who thought they knew best.
Yeah.
So one, you've got the addition of Jimmy, who could have been a one note just for that episode, but we've decided to keep the moron around.
Yeah.
And on the other basis, you've got the humour. Because while the previous Lone Gunmen episodes were all comedy episodes, this is a completely different style of humour.
Yes. The previous ones, at least, were... The Lone Gunmen themselves, at least, were playing everything straight. There was no winking to the camera in them. It was humorous with, I don't know, just the people they're encountering or the circumstances. But it wasn't... There's no toilet humour. There's no dog humping Langley's leg in the previous episodes.
You've got gambling on D&D and things like that instead.
Absurdities that were at least kind of funny. I mean, let's put that as a really strange oversight, is that Langley does not play D&D once in this entire series.
There is the one episode where he's playing the kind of Civ 4-esque game.
But Langley, as a geeky guy with interests that we understand, does none of them. That's the closest he ever got. I don't know if there's a lot of kind of attempts to account for people who haven't seen the X-Files, and I think that's to its undoing, which I'm in two minds about. Because the series standing on its own is probably something to be applauded, because resting too much on another series and constantly referencing back to another series gets really tiring. I mean, look at most of the MCU stuff. I cannot even be bothered to engage with half of it anymore. It's too much. Or Star Wars. Star Wars needs homework these days, and I refuse to do it.
I recently touched on that in my stream, in which someone inferred that I would appreciate Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order more if I knew the extended universe. No, I don't have time for homework.
Yeah. Where was our original point on this?
You were talking about the Lone Gunmen not meeting expectations.
Yes. Which I think, unfortunately, is just the beginning and end of the whole problem, isn't it? Is you're not giving the series, you're not producing the series that we thought you were going to. Because I've said it before, that Lone Gunmen, or rather an X-Files spin-off series, was mooted really long ago, way before Lone Gunmen actually happened. And my first thought was always, Lone Gunmen will be it. It makes sense. You've got 3 existing characters. 3 of Unusual Suspects happened. There's your model for how an episode for them was going to work. And 3 of a Kind, here is your some of the extra cast members you can bring in to fill out the rest of it.
Introducing, well, it's at that point Jimmy the Geek, not Kimmy the Geek, but same difference.
Same difference. It's like, that's the character archetype that we're going to pick up and use. Yeah. That's fine. Suzanne Medeski, you could bring her back in.
Yeah.
This is your template. It was Lone Gunmen. I mean, at the time, I was not aware of how TV executives thought, because I think it's things like Futurama made clear of that one.
Yeah.
On reflection, the Lone Gunmen series that we were promised was never going to happen.
I think it's one of those where if you'd done it today, when geek culture is considered
You'd
cool,
actually get it.
You would get it.
Yeah.
As you wanted it.
Yeah, and we mentioned it before, it's that contrast to the X-Files got away with what it did because David Duchovny is a conventionally attractive man, Gillian Anderson is a conventionally attractive woman.
Yeah.
The Lone Gunmen didn't because I know people do like bias. The other two are a problem.
Poor Langley and Froeke.
I love them. However, I'm not representative of enough of a population of America.
I've got to admit, and I'm doing it as a teenage female viewer, but they were my favourite characters too. Sure. And I was super excited to get a series about them, and I was disappointed as well.
Exactly. I think we also need to dwell on, and it's a troublesome bit because you could argue either way, but I can never shake, based on very vague memories, because it's been many years since I watched it, that this is just the A-Team.
Yeah, you've said that many times.
I have, and I can't escape it. I mean, I barely remember the A-Team because I remember mostly the joke of once an episode, they are locked in a garage, and then they then use welding tools and everything to take things from the garage to turn the van into a tank, break out, and then resolve the episode, shooting stupid numbers of bullets and killing no one.
It was well before my time. I've never actually watched it.
My big thing, though, is there's a lot of, the A-Team, if you can find them, they will help you thing. So it's the whole, there you go and help various people around the world.
Which I guess is like our framing of this series, where people come with stories for them.
Yeah, and the Lone Gunmen get involved in ways that journalists don't.
Yeah.
And in some ways, using the A-Team as your model is fine. I do wonder, I don't think it's in any of the notes. No one actually admits to this. But it's like...
Jimmy references it once, though.
And I don't know if that's an implicit admission by the writers or not. But it's things like the VW van is not removed enough from the van they're using the A-Team in.
Yeah.
But there is the other side to it, is it's Mission Impossible. A series I've never seen the actual TV show, but I've seen the films, obviously, with Tom Cruise. And, I think Ghost Protocol is great.
To be fair, a lot of them are good.
Oh, yeah, but I think Ghost Protocol is the high point, and admittedly, I've never watched the ones after that, which people all say are amazing. But anyway, the point of this is the rubber masks, which Mission Impossible, as far as I understand it, in all the iterations, gets a lot of mileage out of. You can be anyone.
Yes.
And we just have that in the Lone Gunmen.
Yves has it.
Yves has a Lone Gunmen. And Skinner is unfazed when he encounters it as well, which causes some questions.
I still maintain, as I said when we watched The Lion Game, that Skinner should immediately jumped up and screamed, shapeshifter, and started shooting.
The Lone Gunmen should suffer the same paranoia as Mulder should. We've been over this, that after a certain point, the shapeshifter is such a problem that you can't trust anyone. Ever. In any circumstance.
And to be fair, that's kind of the X-Files tagline of trust no one.
Yeah. But in this one, Yves, the resolution to so many episodes is we'll stick Jimmy in a rubber mask with a voice changer, and they will pretend to be the person and therefore resolve the issue. Like, that was Anna Kleiner Froeke.
Yeah.
That was The Lion Game.
Yep.
Shall we do...
Top 3 episodes?
Top 3 episodes. It was good. We haven't actually written these down for shades. We can't do favourite villain because they're all rubbish.
No, but we can talk about the best and the worst.
We can. Okay, so 3 best.
3 best. Do you want me to go first?
Yep.
All right. Off the top of my head, with no preparation, I am going to take the Captain Toby Show.
Yep. Okay.
Like Water for Octane.
Yep.
And Pilot.
Okay.
With Pilot is by far the best episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I did like the other 2 as well, to be fair.
I will be a little bit sparing. I will take The Lion Game.
Okay.
Water for Octane and Pilot.
You're not going with Captain Toby?
I did also like Captain Toby, but I'll just say The Lion Game is the other decently written episode, so I'll give that.
I did like The Lion Game as well.
I'm going to give them that.
And it did exceed expectations because I had a horrible moment where I thought they were going to be terribly homophobic and weren't.
Transphobic.
Transphobic, yes, sorry. And weren't, but so I'll give it credit.
And also, Mitch Pileggi's turn as Jimmy being Skinner.
Yeah, that was good too.
That was good. Worst episodes then?
You're first.
I'm trying to think in descending order because I know I will have to wind up. So Anna Kleiner Froeke.
Yeah.
Is absolutely was really unimpressive. Madam I'm Adam for absolutely incoherent plotting, and Diagnosis Jimmy for everything.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can really even put them in an order, but I'm going to take 3 Men in a Smoking Diaper.
Damn it, I forgot about that one again. I've just got a void now. I can't remember the episode. I should be thankful I can't remember it.
I'm going to take Maximum Buyers.
Yeah. Also good call.
And while I will give honourable mention to Eine kleine Frau Hickey because it's painful, I'm probably going to have to go with Diagnostic Jimmy because, as you called it at the time, it is the doldrums.
It's just 4 bits of an episode that don't work. Yeah. It's so bizarre. I hate it. So my plan is to take the DVDs and smash them.
And then burn them?
And even if someone says we should give them the series another shot, is no. I mean, this is the second time we've watched this series, and it has not improved. In fact, I think it's actually an even less good experience the second time round.
I do agree with what people said of after the Tango episode, it did start to pick up.
Yeah.
It was just too little too late.
Yes, and also All About Yves has the fundamental flaw of this episode is futile and pointless, and I don't understand why it exists. I know, I'm going to come back to you. You put it perfectly. Stake out the Lone Gunmen office and grab her when she comes in. Yeah. The whole elaborate setup is pointless.
Yeah. I think it's a shame in a way because it was a labour of love and they were so hoping they'd get a second season. But that makes the Yves episode even more pointless because we know they don't.
Yeah. And again, it has an asterisk, and it's a really annoying asterisk, and I don't remember enough about Jump the Shark to even... Well, no, I remember one thing about Jump the Shark, and I'm trying to remember anything else for this, how any of this pays off. We will find out in, 7 weeks' time.
Yeah.
Next week, I didn't think we'd actually say this, but thankfully, we're going back to the X-Files.
In words you never thought you'd hear Nick say of, woohoo, it's season 9.
It can't possibly be as aggravating, I hope.
So this is not happening?
No, it's nothing important happened today.
Is it a two-parter?
It is two-parter.
So it's part 1 and 2?
Yep. So this is the first time since Little Green Men there's no preamble. This is the start of a new season, the start of a new storyline.
Yep.
If you'd like to get hold of us and passionately defend the Lone Gunmen, you've not done a good job so far.
Or, of course, let us know before season 9 what you think of season 9.
That would be good to know too. Our email address is thingsgettingstrange42@gmail.com.
You can also find us on social media, and if you want me to promote anything X-Files related at the start of one of our episodes, do let me know. We're on Twitter and Tumblr at GetStrange42, we're on Mastodon at GetStrange42@universedon.com, and on Facebook, where you can find us by searching for Things Are Getting Strange and X-Files Rewatch Podcast. Additionally, and if you're not sick of my voice, I also stream on Twitch TV. I'm live Mondays and Wednesdays at 8 PM GMT and Saturdays at 5 PM GMT under the name Adverse Camber 42. At the moment, I play PlayStation games, but at the moment I am playing Yakuza 4 Remastered and also Disco Elysium.
We have a Patreon, patreon.com/thingsgettingstrange, where for as little as $3 a month you can have access to our bonus episodes and help us keep the lights on. Bonus episodes include our Let's Play of the X-Files game from 1998, starring Quay Gilmore as he searches for Mulder and Scully. And we might have got him killed a few times.
Just once or twice.
Our theme music is envisioned by Kevin MacLeod. You can find it on Compotech.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. Thank you all for listening, and until next time, please remember...
The truth is out there.